Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Mondays for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Eric and Matt here with Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon for all things freedom in a world gone absolutely bonkers.
Absolutely bonkers.
Well, today's show is bonkers because we're going to be talking about the economy and capitalism and, all sorts of fun things like that, small business. Today's show, we're really going to talk about how things are going. It seems that, no matter what sort of economist you talk to on a regular basis, it seems that there's always some sky is falling scenario. And I will sort of preface today's show by mentioning, look, Matt and I are by no means financial experts. We're not claiming to be experts on the economy. We are simply small business owners who are going to put in our 2 cents and give our opinion on some of the things that are going on and share some observations that we have collectively made. And today's show will also be discussing the gun industry. So many people follow me here on Iraq Veteran on the main YouTube channel because I'm mainly into firearms. Now that I do have a great deal of expertise on. So we will share some of the downturn in the gun community and kind of mention like what's going on with the gun industry right now. And we'll discuss that in more detail as we go. And we also have a little Q&A session. We're going to be answering some questions today on the show. And we are looking for guests for the show. So let me know. We already have a few people in mind. We are still doing just a little bit of housekeeping. We are still doing some work on the studio. So bear with us. Pardon the dust. We are going to be changing some things up and building some new sets. So I'm really excited about that. I've got a few things for sale on Gunbroker to help fund those changes. So if you want to put in some bids, go grab yourself something and, help us out there. That would be great. Some war bucks for the war chest. We're going to get cracking. How are things?
It's been great. I think it's going to be a great show. And like you said, it's, we're just 2 guys, but we just happen to be small business owners. And that, it affects us differently. The way the economy moves and the way that we react to the economy is much different than how someone that's not a small business owner is going to feel it. We have to react a little bit differently. Obviously, tariffs they don't affect my business. I own a jiu-jitsu academy, so we are all we don't really have any assets. It's just teaching and mats, and we have some gym equipment. With Ballistic Inc., we no longer operate Ballistic Inc. However, with that said, the tariffs wouldn't have affected Ballistic Inc. anyways. It was 100% made in the U.S. products, so that wasn't an issue. But it probably does affect 90% of clothing businesses because a lot of those are coming in from overseas. So I can see how that can affect the bottom line for them. Your standard W-2 employees are going to feel it. And they're going to have their reservations about it. But like I said, from a standpoint of being small business owners, we tackle these problems a little bit differently.
We are going to break into it. And obviously the consumer, we're going to discuss it from the consumer's perspective as well, because we are obviously all consumers here, no matter what. So we will discuss consumerism as well, which, I think you're going to like some of the things I have to say. I have some very interesting observations about it, and my views have changed a little bit. But before we get started, we're going to thank our first sponsor for the show, and that is Choq. Our country just witnessed Donald Trump overcome political persecution, an assassination attempt, and the entire deep state to retake the presidency with a historic victory. There's one secret ingredient that allowed Trump to do this, and that's testosterone. What most people don't realize is that testosterone makes men willing and eager to take on challenges. Sadly, too many of us have lost our fight, and that's exactly how the globalists want it. They want us weak, out of shape, and full of estrogen and microplastics with low T. That's why we're excited to partner with Choq. Choq offers a whole lineup of products formulated to increase your energy, focus, detoxify your body, and clinically studied boost testosterone. Ingredients in the Choq Male Vitality Stack have been clinically studied to boost free testosterone in 87% in just 21 days. Unlike with gimmicky vegetable pills or powder, you will feel the difference, and they will have the clinical studies to back it up. Right now, you can get 25% off your Choq subscription for life. Just go to Choq.com. It is spelled CHOQ. That is Charlie Hotel Oscar Quebec. Trebek. It always makes you think of that meme. .com and use the promo code LLP, Lima Papa. That's 25% off any subscription for life, and you can cancel anytime. Choq is made in America, and their all-American customer service team is standing by to assist you. It's time to make men's vitality great again. Get yourself some Choq today. That's CHOQ.com. The promo code is LLP for 25% off your subscription for life.
That's a good deal, man. If you could tell me I could get 20% off of my needed supplements for life.
25% off, son.
Shoot. Sign me up.
That's right. So we're going to, look and dive into, what's really going on. It's absolutely crazy. I know we've discussed, we did our episode on tribalism and globalism and just talking about the overall, global movement of global trade, which I'm not going to ever claim to be some master of. Like, I know the chessboard as I see it from an overall view. You don't know the conversations that are occurring in back rooms. Mm-hmm. You don't know what all the leaders of the world ultimately know in terms of available information to you, as well as potential threats. So geopolitically, let's just say there is this huge empty space that we are not really going to be privy to some of the things that, let's just face it, the world leaders know that we don't know. Things that are changing, moves that are being made, potential conflicts that are arising. I mean, there's going to be saber rattling that we can kind of look at and say, hey, these are the things that are going on. Well, we already cut an episode where we kind of dove into that subject a bit. What I really want this to be about is, how is all this really affecting small business owners? How is it affecting the end consumer? And is capitalism sort of in the strange death throes? I want to start out with a little story. And it's not really much of a story, really more of just an experience, an exposure. And so, we recently, my girlfriend and I recently got a new puppy. And of course, we'd like to take the puppy on walks and get her, acquainted with people. Because, we don't want her to grow up and be an dog. We want her to be a sweet girl. So we want to get her around people. So we'll go to malls and all sorts of public places like that and let her walk around and just get used to being around people. And of course, folks are naturally going to come up and want to see the dog and pet the dog and all that sort of stuff. I don't think I have to explain the minutia of going to the mall. However, when you look at malls, all right, that's a really good way to get an idea of what is going on with the consumers in your given culture. Okay, look at mall culture back in the 1990s, for instance. The mall was the place to be.
Oh my goodness!
They were open late. They all had really nice, fancy arcades. Moms would drop their kids off at the arcade with $20, and the kid could play on an arcade machine for hours on $20. I'm not sitting here trying to, paint it as some Beaver Cleaverville picturesque landscape, but it was relatively picturesque. I mean, the malls were a really cool place to hang out. Lots of really good stores. Now, I understand that the nature of consumerism has changed vastly over the last 30 years with, internet shopping. And, we are going to discuss places like Amazon here in a moment. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will. But you notice it almost has this feeling like capitalism is in its death throes if you simply look at something like a mall and you go, well, for one, the place is kind of dead. There's not a lot of people walking around. Unless it's a real busy weekend, it's just not very busy. Two, you look at people walking around. Do they have shopping bags in their hands? I remember in the 90s when you would go in the shopping mall and some soccer mom would be walking around with bags full of shit. I mean, walk around with a Starbucks in her hand or whatever it may be, or maybe not then. I don't think Starbucks was around then. But, walking around with their drink and their little dog and tons of bags. And you just had this overall feeling and view that, like, wow, the economy's strong. Like you see soccer moms walking around with bags full of crap. Toy stores, large toy stores like Babbage's were open. And that store's been out of business for a long time. But, like, it's just was crazy. It's like people had a lot more disposable income. And I guess that's really what this comes down to, is debasement of currency. And again, I'm no financial expert, Matt. I'm no economist, but it doesn't take a degree in economics for someone to see that when you print yourself out of oblivion with a currency, you're debasing the value of that currency. You're taking away from the value of people who hold that currency. If you simply print it out of nowhere, you devalue the currency, and you end up having less purchasing power dollar for dollar than you had previously. And you continue to eat and pay a hidden tax that is part of the currency debasement. Right? It's fractional banking. The way that system works is they loan out more money than they have. They do not have the money they loan out. They loan out way more than what they actually have. Now, you look at this thing under a giant, let's just say, microcosm, an overhead view, a very broad overhead view. Again, I'm not claiming to be some master economist, but I don't think it takes a master economist to see what is really going on here and the play that is in place when a certain group of people is allowed to game the system in a way that benefits them in perpetuity, and that they do not actually have to suffer the consequences of bad decisions, be it a bad policy decision, a bad economic decision, a bad purchase decision. If you paid twice as much for your car than what it was worth, that'd be a bad economic decision for you to make. That'd be a bad financial decision, correct? Right. But what if you could make those decisions in perpetuity without consequence? That's what we're seeing. We have an entire subset of our society that do not have to be beholden to their shitty decisions. We carry the consequences of those decisions, not them. And I forget who said it, but the way any empire ends up falling is they wind up spending someone else's money. Any empire is going to fail if all they do is spend someone else's money, and they never have to actually suffer the consequences of bad decisions. Are we at a point, Matt, where it's like the death throes emptying the coffers of the Roman Empire, or is that where we are?
No, I think there's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of people saying that capitalism is on its way out. But I'll tell you that couldn't be farther from the case. And I'll tell you that from experience. I was and this is just one small part. Everybody says, oh, the economy's in shambles. I was at Great Wolf Lodge over the weekend we had a wrestling tournament with my daughter. Great Wolf Lodge is not inexpensive by any means. It's like $350, $400 a night. It's a giant water park. If you guys know, it's a giant water park, indoors, like hotel. It's like a theme park that you stay at. Absolutely packed. I mean, every single room in that place was sold out. Park was filled up. So if the economy is doing so bad, how is this place full? Like I'm not seeing what they're reporting. And they're saying, oh, like gas prices are high. It's $1.79 a gallon here in Georgia. It's pretty inexpensive. When you look at, capitalism as a whole, there's going to be that subset of people that take advantage of those, I should say, public services. But there's also the people that want to use capitalism to get out and get up and be successful. And that is what capitalism is about. It's about being able to risk it all and be successful. It's about being able to pull yourself up, quote, by your bootstraps, and make something of yourself. The harder you work, the more you get out of it. And I'll use China as an example right now. They're having you might not see it on mainstream TV because they're not reporting it, but there are a ton of protests going on. It's like an uprising in China right now. You can go. There's actually content creators that specialize in getting that information out of China. And you can see it. They're having to quash all of these uprisings from the younger generation because they don't have capitalism. It's actually a huge problem. They have it's called, the movement is like let it rot. That's what it translates to in English. And the younger generation don't have any way to move up. It's a communist country. So you are what you are. It's not like you can get promoted in a company and do well for yourself. You're kind of already set. And these younger generation, they don't, there's no benefit for them to wake up in the morning and go to work and, really grind it out, because they're never going to get to where they need to be at to be successful. It's already, that story has already been written. So they just let it rot. And they're having a huge problem right now. They have to go through, and Xi Jinping is begging that younger generation to help and to get back to work and to make something of themselves. But what's the benefit? Why would they do that? There's nothing in it for them. You have other countries that are capitalistic in nature based off of the US style. So you have South Korea, you have Japan. Both of those countries do very well, but they also have the same issue. The older generation are in place. The younger generation aren't having kids. They have very, very low population rates. And there is no desire for that generation to go up. They don't care. There's no financial benefit to them. The cost of living is extremely high, so they could try to make more money. It's going to be the same. Versus in the US, we have every incentive to do better because there is no top. The cream rises to the top, brother. You're going to make it. It just depends on how hard you work.
That's true.
And to me, that's what capitalism is all about. It's not about, what everybody wants. We get yes, it's great that we have, everything is based off of democracy and we get to vote and everybody has a voice. But that also means that everybody has the ability to be successful.
Yeah. I totally agree. And, I think that that's a very astute observation, talking about birth rates, because I know that's something that Elon discusses a lot and a lot of other economists discuss, the declining birth rates. And that is a problem. And I think that society begins to get this form of apathy, so we will discuss that a little bit. Before we go too much further, I do want to give a shout out to the next sponsor in the show. That's our friends at My Patriot Supply. Let me ask you something. If the grocery store shelves went empty tomorrow, would your family be ready? I trust My Patriot Supply with my family's food security, and here's why. They've helped millions of Americans prepare for the worst, and they have over 70,000 five-star reviews. I personally keep their 3-month emergency food kit on hand, and right now you can get it for $200 off. That's a huge discount, and believe me, My Patriot Supply almost never offers deals like this. This food kit gives you 2,000 calories a day per person for 3 months. The food tastes great, lasts up to 25 years, ships free, with delivery in as little as 2 days. To take advantage of this deal, just go to preparewithllp.com. Look, we can't control what's going on in the world, but we can control how prepared we are. This $200 off discount is only for a limited time, so don't wait. Go to preparewithllp.com right now. That's preparewithllp.com to get your peace of mind while it's still available. What a great group of people. I mean, their food is fantastic. And, it does kind of coincide with today's show a bit. That sponsor fits perfect because people are a lot more worried about the future than they have been, in the past. Now, I know that might be a cliche thing for me to say. Maybe you go, well, every generation thinks that the generation before them or that comes after them has it easier than they did. There's some kind of odd universal paradigm where, well, you kids don't understand what it was like when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And then those people are going to tell their kids, oh, you don't understand what it was like when we were a kid. Every generation always thinks that they're superior to the generation under them because they feel like what is there is because they built it and put it there. But there might have also been opportunities available to them that weren't available to the younger generation. So when you see, for instance, a young Japanese person who is living in a cubicle, yep, and working their butt off 10 hours a day, and they can't even afford a cubicle, much less a house to raise a family in, what motivation do they have to find a girl and settle down and have a family when they're living in a cubicle and it's taking everything that they can produce to simply live in a cubicle? The suicide rates, as hard as that is to talk about, are quite high. in a place like Japan. And again, we don't ever want to call the Japanese out in any way. That's not the intention here. But that's a good example how their society is suffering from a really big issue with motivation and with wages being decent enough. I mean, there are a lot of abandoned houses in Japan.
Yep.
But they cost so much money to renovate, and they're so difficult to get to, and a lot of them are in very remote places, and it's very difficult for people to get cars there. You know, you have to prove that you have a place to park a car to even buy a car. Fuel's expensive, so by the time you take all those factors, yeah, the young folks are suffering a lot. And I know that people make this comparison quite a bit, but I'm going to make the comparison again. Let's go back across the ocean to here. All right, back to America. Okay.
America.
Back to America. Back there with them screaming eagles.
Yeah, good old boy.
So, all right. You look at the boomer generation here. You know, a guy was born in 1949, okay? Right? You know, he works his summer job and buys a car. You know, pays cash for a car. Just doing his summer job or something. Saving up some money, you know. He works for 2 or 3 years and save up enough money to buy 10 acres and builds a house on it, you know. Meets a young hippie girl and settles down, has a family, you know, and one day his homestead is worth, you know, $500,000 and it cost him $100,000. You know, when you look at the boomer generation, they always want to point their finger at us and say, well, you just aren't working hard enough. You aren't doing this. You aren't doing that. Mm-hmm. Right. But who bought a house for $65,000? You're going to buy a house for $65,000 now? No. Do you know what the average cost to buy a house is right now for the new home buyer, for the first time home buyer? It's either right at or over $400,000 is the minimum to get into, let's just say, a small single family dwelling, wife and kids, let's say 2 kids and a wife, 4 people dwelling, right? Let's just say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, maybe a garage and an acre of land.
I believe it.
Right. You're talking $400,000. And I've seen some houses around here that are rather unflattering for $500,000 or $400,000. So the prices have gotten crazy. So for a boomer to look a younger person in the face and say, well, you're just not working hard enough. Well, how can that objectively be true when the average age of a new home buyer, do you know what that age is?
If I had to take a wild guess, and I'm just taking a
it's going to scare you.
I'm going to take a stab in the dark here. 31.
No, 54.
What?
Most of the transactions that are being carried out with real estate involve people in their 50s.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? It tells you young people definitely cannot afford on their income to buy a home, right?
Yep.
It means that investors are buying these homes. People like BlackRock and all that. I mean, come on, look, again, I'm not an economist, okay? I'm not an expert here. I'm just a person that just sees what's happening. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to just look at the equation and plug in some figures and go, wait a minute, something is not adding up. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm proud of the boomer generation. They built a lot. Sure, they were very successful. And look, they were very lucky. Imagine being lucky enough to be born in 1949, right after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
You know, too young to fight in the Korean War, too old to fight in Vietnam. Holy crap. Way too old to fight in any wars after that. You're definitely not going to Desert Storm, any of those other places. I mean, The boomer generation, you want to talk about privilege. You want to talk about someone who's lucky. Someone who was born after World War II is extremely freaking lucky. They've had a lot of opportunity, didn't have to fight in any wars.
Yep.
I mean, come on. Got to be an adult during the hippie era, free love and all that crap and LSD. I mean, like, you want to talk about someone who's privileged. The World War II generation was privileged after, you know, the people that were children. Yeah, post-World War II. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I mean, hey, all this death and destruction and chaos, what did the world want to do? They wanted to go home, make babies. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. I get it. It's the American dream. What occurred was a very beautiful thing. But when we look at that nuclear household family unit,
mm-hmm.
that is not achievable for a lot of young people now. You know, look, my girlfriend and I just had this, we were having this discussion a few days ago. It might have even been last night, I remember. We were talking about how a lot of couples now are 50-50. where they go, all right, well, the rent is X amount. Well, the woman's going to pay 50% and the guy's going to pay 50%. What? Wait a minute. No. On my grandpa's day, he could work one job and pay all the bills, and they could have a car to drive and new appliances and a house, and take a vacation or two every year and have a nice Christmas. All right, what's missing here? So now it requires two incomes to do what one income used to do. If we look at it simply from that perspective, there's something really wrong there. So now people are getting married or engaged or getting together simply for survival. Never mind, hey, do we have kids or not? If people are living on the cuff of the edge of being able to afford a home and, let's just say, afford the American dream, they're almost together for survival as much as they are, well, forget having a family. We need to be together just so we can collectively afford to live.
That I have seen. It does.
I'm not saying it's everybody.
Right.
But it's a few.
But to your point, it's true. You used to be able to get by on a single income, and, you had the one family car, and you had the wife and the two kids, and you were still able to make it through life, and you were still able to do most of the things you wanted to. And, obviously the, value of the dollar went down. We got off the gold standard. They started printing more money. And now where we're at now, we're not quite to the point of Venezuela where we're burning bricks of money to cook food and stay warm. And I'm not going to say that we're going that way, because obviously we're not. We're America. We're the strongest country in the world. We have the strongest economy, and we have the strongest people. We're going to continue to do what we need to do to survive. And let's not get this twisted. All right. People say, oh, America's in, like, the economy's in shambles. Like, we have homeless people that have cell phones for free. They get wireless internet for free. Our economy, our homeless live better than most third world countries. All right. It's relative when you say our economy is in shambles and we're going to go into a recession. The day that our homeless people live worse than a third world country, you can come and say something, but they don't. And that's not a litmus test for how well the economy is doing, but it just gives you an idea of how the idea of what is in shambles, quote, and what is normal. You can get a litmus test based off of that. What I will say is that when you got to the point where you had to have dual income, so you had your single income, you have your dual income with kids, you really saw that when the American people started wanting more. It used to be like, hey, we were happy with the 3-bedroom mid-modern century Brady Bunch home, and it wasn't this huge house, and you didn't have a 3-car garage, and you didn't have like a huge yard. It was like, hey, this is what the family dwelling was. Everybody had their assigned roles in their rooms. Now it became keeping up with the Joneses. You had to say, hey, well, so-and-so's family has a 5-bedroom, McMansion with a horse stable, and up in Milton, Georgia, they have a farm, and they have a helicopter pad with little statues that spit water. I got to have that too. So what do you need? You need more money. I think it was George Carlin that had that bit about buying a bigger house to put more stuff. And then you get so much more stuff, you got to buy a bigger house so you can put even more stuff in the house. It's a great bit. I recommend you guys look it up. But that's essentially where we're going. People you're like, oh, I need more stuff. I need more house. And you hear it all the time. People, oh, I need more car. Our family's getting too big. I need more car. So I got to go get a bigger car. I'm like, okay, I get it. Well, how about you just wait? Or how about, no one is saying that you can't have a big family, but maybe you should time that a little bit better. Maybe you should say, hey, why don't we get to a better place to where we can? Just my thoughts. I'm not a subject matter expert by any means, but a lot of this is just bad decision making. People say, hey, I want it now versus I'm going to delayed gratification. I can wait a couple of years and I can be in a better position. I can be in a better place than I am right now. And maybe it won't impact me. Waiting 2 or 3 years before I do something, maybe I won't suffer for those 2 or 3 years. Maybe I don't have to eat, ramen noodles for a year because I made a decision today.
That's a very astute observation, Matt. We are an instant gratification society, and that has played hard into the way consumers consume, the way that they actually engage in the idea of objectifying stuff over experiences. And, it goes back to what you said about that $400 a night place being occupied by so many people. Folks, especially the younger generation, the millennials and Gen X and those sorts of people, they seem to be really dialing in on experiences over things. And it actually gives me a lot of hope for the future, because I fell victim to the idea of just buying and buying and buying and buying. And you know the amount of things I have. And it's like, I think I was trying to fill a void in my life that, I didn't really know what I was missing, and I was trying to fill that void and achieve happiness through things, which can be a very self-destructive thing to do. You think, well, wait a minute, I've got the rock star life, I've got, a huge gun collection, I've got a collection of music gear that would make most studios jealous, I've got the badass truck and the badass boat, and
you had some cool motorcycles.
And you have motorcycles, and you're living like a rock star, and you're doing well, and you're successful, and you think, well, oh man, despite all this, why am I not happy? Why is my life feel like it's just an empty void, even though you have all these things to fill it with? And again, you begin to realize, and this may be even a deeper conversation than just simply the economy, but on my perspective, I'm telling you about my perspective as a consumer and buying so much crap over the years, that eventually you go, I really wish I would have taken some of that money that I bought those guns with, maybe, and went and, took a cool trip to Rome, or, went to go visit Australia, or maybe went on a sightseeing trip in a helicopter, or did a helicopter hog hunt, or whatever it might be, that maybe you would have done more experiences with that money, because experiences you can't take away. Once they're there, it's like, wow, you've provided something wholesome to your life. Mm-hmm. You've used your money for something that enhances the life experience, not just fills what that experience should fill the void of, with things that, maybe provide you with some brief satisfaction, but not a long-lasting, meaningful satisfaction.
I can agree with you 110%. And I didn't realize that till I got older, because I, like you, were very, very similar. I was like, hey, I want this. You get to a point, where your income can support that. Because as you're growing up, like I grew up, poor. Like I didn't have I wanted a lot of stuff, but I couldn't afford it. I couldn't go out and get it. But then you get to a point where you are successful and you can go out and point at something and say, hey, that's cool, I want that, and just buy it. Maybe it's a little irresponsible, but if the income can support it, why not? But like you, Eric, I got into a trend of just, buying and buying and buying, and it wasn't really fulfilling anything. Then I had my daughter, and then it became, hey, what can we do together for experiences? What can we experience together that's going to give me more than just a trinket or a gun or a car or some doodad that I want? And it became traveling with her to, sports events, wrestling or jujitsu. And that is ultimately why, not a lot of people know this, but that's why we closed Ballistic Inc. Ballistic Inc. was an amazing experience. It was an amazing company that, I ran, that, Eric was a partner with, and we supported all of the, YouTube GunTube content creators. And we did that for about 5 or 6 years. We did all American products, and we did the merch. Amazing experience. We had tens of thousands of customers that we supported by sending them product, that you guys were gracious enough to support those content creators, and it was awesome. Ultimately, it took up a lot of time. Like, it's a lot of work supporting like that many content creators with that volume of shirts.
Wow. I'll tell you, it doesn't take an economist to figure out, y'all, that time is the ultimate currency.
Yep.
We can talk about money, and we can talk about the stock market. We can talk about the war of ideas. We can talk about the war of spirituality. We can talk about this religion, this color, that color. At the end of the day, time is the ultimate currency. It is your trade. It is your currency. It is literally the only thing that you don't really know how much you have. You can look at a dollar figure in the bank account, and you can assign some value to that. How much time it took you to earn that money, that number in the bank account. You can go, all right, what can that money buy me? What can it do for me? What thing can it get me? But at the end of the day, you don't really know how much time you really have. So when you're grinding away at your 9 to 5, you're thinking, I got to get this money to consume. And don't get me wrong, America has been made a really unique and great place by consumerism. To your effect, Matt, you were talking about that lodge being, having all the people there. Same thing with Disney, all right? Mm-hmm. I know in the other podcast we talked about my trip to Disney. My first time ever going to Disney World. All right, I'll put it on for me. My first time ever going to Disney World. Let me put this hat on for me.
Oh, you got the Mickey Mouse
ears.
So,
look, it was the first time ever going to Disney World. And you go in the main gate, and you're dropping $600 freaking bucks for 3 tickets just to get in the door. So if you're talking a family of 3 kids and wife and kids,
yep,
you're talking $1,000 just to walk in the front door. Now tell me, can you assign a price to that experience, or can you go, wow, is $1,000 really worth it? See, at that point, the park becomes, now, whether or not you agree with the woke Disney crap. I mean, look, let's just put all that aside and just look at it for what it is. It is a park where kids can go and feel like they're in a magical place. At the end of the day, get all the fluff away and just treat it for what it is.
That's it.
It is a Las Vegas for kids. Is essentially what that place is.
That's a great way to put it.
It's Las Vegas for kids. All right. Can you put a price on the way you feel when you're with your kids in that place?
No.
You can say all the wokeness. Look, all that aside, can you literally put a price on how happy it made your daughter when you took her?
Nope, you cannot.
You would pay anything. If that ticket was $500, let's say the tickets for the adults were $40, but the tickets for the kids were $800. Would you pay $800 to get your daughter in that park?
I would.
You would.
Yep.
Right. Because experiences are valuable, right? Knowledge is valuable, right? When we look at, like your jiu-jitsu academy, you're providing more than just simply some product that someone can buy a widget. You're providing a service. You're providing knowledge. And knowledge is power. And people will spend money on experiences. They will spend money on knowledge. I hope they would. For instance, I do the powerlifting right now. I've been a power lifter for 2 years. Yes, I have a trainer. And yeah, I pay James pretty well. Okay. Like, he's not cheap. He charges, right? But I invest in myself. I invest in making a better version of myself. I don't know how much time I'm going to have left. Time is the currency. So therefore, my investment is in hopefully providing more time for me to exist on this world. And if that means that I've got to spend some money to do that, well, then what is money worth if you're dead? Now, I say all of this to get back to the baseline conversation. And that is that when we look at the way that the economy is going, I mean, how are consumers really feeling about what's going on? Well, just because they may not be buying widget A, B, or C, let's kind of talk about the firearms industry for a minute, because the firearms industry right now is in a huge downturn, right? Lots of people are spending way less money on firearms and ammo. I mean, we just had Trump elected. So, of course, anytime there's a Republican president incoming in the presidency, we always see a slump in sales in the gun industry because the best gun salesmen are Democrats. So anytime a Democrat gets elected, everyone wants to go crazy because they're worried about the way things are going to go, and they go buy a bunch of firearms. So right now there's a downturn in everything going on in the firearms industry. And you're going to see that kind of ebb and flow of consumerism go from, all right, well, they're not buying maybe guns as much anymore, but maybe they're getting some training, or maybe they're going to take on, like, I don't know, go drive a tank or fly a helicopter or do some cool experience that's still in the vein of that, but just not directly buying a firearm per se. Maybe they're going to pay for that hunt that they always wanted to go on with their family or something. Or maybe they're going to pay for that fishing excursion that, maybe they couldn't justify the expense before, but maybe now they do. So you may see an increase in VRBOs, or what is it? What do they call the Airbnbs?
Yep.
You may see an increase in people going and taking on experiences. So just because the economy pivots, and again, I'm no economist, y'all. I'm just saying the reality of what you see in front of you. Just because something pivots from one area of the industry to another doesn't mean there's still not money changing hands for goods and or services, or both, or either or. So it's just an interesting paradigm to consider. Under that paradigm, again, let's go back really quick, because I wanted to mention something about the nuclear household, because we were talking about how the boomer generation, which I hate to say boomer, but that's what they are. They're the boomer generation, the late 40s generation, had an unprecedented amount of luxury and wealth and opportunity, and just a lucky set of circumstances that really put them in a place to be the people they are today. They're very successful today, many of them. As long as they made decent decisions, they're in a really good place today. And when we look at the modern family unit, let's look at the millennials and the Gen X now, and look at that as a family unit. Okay, guy meets girl, and they want to have a family, all right? Now that idea is far less palatable and available to people now than it was in 1949. Back in the day, it was much easier to start a family and have that sort of American dream than it is now. But let's also look at the type of standards that people have now. Okay, now this is something crazy. In fact, my girlfriend and I were talking about this. In fact, last night, I believe we had this discussion where we talked about how people's standards and what they have for a partner are far, far blown out of proportion, right? Some guy who is not really doing so well financially, maybe he doesn't have his shit together. Maybe he's not in shape. Maybe he's a little fat, thinking that he's going to score an 11 and, he's going to have the super hot girl and that's what he deserves. Well, is that the value you're bringing to the table? And then vice versa. A guy who's got his shit together, he's in shape, he's making good money, he's well established, he's a person that is not a screw up, okay? He's not in trouble, not doing, a high value guy. Now, is that to say that, some girl who is a 3 at best, that 3 girl has it in her mind that she's going to get the 11 guy no matter what. And all she wants is the 11 guy, but she doesn't want to make herself at least an 8 or 9. It doesn't want to improve herself.
Right.
We were talking about that paradigm, how, women get their views blown way out of proportion on what they'll accept in a male partner, and vice versa, men to women. And again, I'm not claiming to be some life coach or dating coach. I'll give a quick shout out to my good friend, Coach Corey Wayne. Now, if you do want to talk to a good dating coach, he's your man. Talk to Corey Wayne. However, Corey Wayne will tell you, I think I can say this with his approval, that you have to be the best version of yourself that you can possibly be. You attract what you are, and you are what you attract. So it's like if someone wants the picturesque view of success and power and strength and love and a good romantic relationship and a good life, you've got to work hard to achieve it. And you're not going to be on a lower tier rung of society as a person and expect to have the world handed to you. That's not what capitalism is. That's not how capitalism works. Capitalism is the opportunity for you to create the circumstances that give you the things that you want. And yeah, you're going to have to work your butt off for it. I worked my butt off for 16 years producing YouTube content day in and day out and working my butt off so that I could be where I am today.
Yep.
So those laurels, that you don't necessarily rest on your laurels, you always stay hungry. You never say, well, I achieved something, therefore I'm just going to lay back and just be a slob. No, you're always going to look for the next step. And then those laurels are on laurels are on laurels. And that's how it works. You create these layers of financial security that insulate you from failure. I mean, that's how it works. And the older you get, the more insulated you are, then you can kind of sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor a little bit. But you should never be sedentary. You should still kind of always set that next chess piece in motion, right? You have to think that way. You cannot think of success as simply trading time for money. Right. If you do that, you're gonna wind up in a position you're not gonna be happy in.
Well, that's kind of what happened with Ballistic Ink when I was talking about, say, hey, we worked for 5 or 6 years and it went great. Spending too much time. I need my currency back. We let that one go, and we went with the Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Gives me way more time to spend with my family and to have those experiences.
And you're happier for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You're way happier for it, And again, I will mention, because Matt and I both receive disability compensation for military service. And there's a lot of people out there that may draw some negative view of, well, you collect money from the government and you're a dependa. You hear that word thrown around. You're a dependa. But look, if you get hurt in combat, you're combat MOS, or really an MOS, but let's just say under the guise of being an infantry soldier, your body gets royally up, if I'm just being honest here. I mean, you get messed up. And, there's a cost to that. There's a literal cost to what it takes for you to have gotten hurt or messed up in combat, and now you have to live a debilitated life. So yes, we have mechanisms in place to insulate those veterans from failure, okay? And it's only fair. I feel like I worked for that. I suffered for that. You suffered for that. We suffered together, brother.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not always an easy thing for society to cope with, that yes, there was some work put in. There was some blood equity and sweat equity that was put in for that. That was not just someone being given something. No, you earned that. You gave the price of blood to earn that. Before we go much further in the conversation, I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at modernwarriors.com. When it comes to protecting yourself and your family, having the right gear matters. That's why I trust Modern Warriors, your go-to source for all things tactical. They've got a massive selection of firearms, suppressors, and accessories, everything from high-end builds to everyday carry essentials. Whether you're a collector, competitor, or just looking for reliable self-defense options, they've got you covered. With over 800 five-star Google reviews, their customer service speaks for itself. And right now, you can save 10% on your first order when you use a promo code LIBERTY at checkout. Visit modernwarriors.com today, browse their selection, and see why they're not just another gun shop. They're your tactical specialists. Remember to use the code LIBERTY at checkout. That's modernwarriors.com, code LIBERTY. Good stuff. Really great group of folks there. So, again, the multiple layers that insulate you from failure are really what you're looking for. And again, this kind of goes back to us talking about this from a perspective of small business owner, is to have multiple revenue streams, right, that ultimately work for you when you're not working.
Yep.
Okay. I'm giving you a little tip here, y'all. Okay. I'm trying to drop some wisdom as best I can. I mean, look, I will be completely and frankly honest with you brothers and sisters here. I do not have a freaking college education. I've never set foot in a freaking college. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have my whole life, I have winged my entire existence and just took the risk. That is the axiom of capitalism.
Yep.
You can be an ignorant person. I mean, let's talk about Jeff Bezos. I'm not saying that, wow, ignorant person, Jeff Bezos. No, he wasn't ignorant. But he was a person who started from extremely humble means, maybe had some slip ups in the beginning, right? But now look at him. He's getting his TRT on. He's got his hot girl. He's got his big boat. He said, screw the haters. I'm going to be me. I'm going to be the best version of myself. What did Jeff Bezos do? He created the best version of himself. He surrounded himself with the hottest and greatest and best and most talented people. And right. The cream floats to the top.
Yep.
And iron sharpens iron. And I don't hate the man for that. Anyone who would say, well, Jeff Bezos is filthy rich, so screw him. No, screw you, because you failed. You failed to see the bigger picture, not him. You cannot say, well, screw Jeff Bezos because he's simply wealthy. What a smooth-brained, low-tier statement for a person to just say, well, I just hate him because I'm not him.
Right.
That's
exactly it.
No way.
And
I'm proud of him. I don't know him from anybody, but I'm proud of that because that's the American dream.
That is the American dream. It's the epitome of the American dream. Mm-hmm. It goes back to people looking for a crutch on why they're not successful. Like, why do you hate him? Because he's so rich. That's not a very good reason to hate somebody. No. Because they have money. No. Like, you couldn't come up with something better than that. They're always looking down on themselves. They have that victim mentality. Like, oh, it's because of this. It's because of that. Just get out there and get it done, man. Like, keep your nose to the grindstone, as they say. There's so many cliche, sayings that, you could say, and I'm not going to say it because they're cliche. But one of them, when you were talking about, the boomer generation, they were too young to be in Vietnam. They were too old to hit, the Persian Gulf War, but they were born kind of in that Goldilocks era of of missing out on all of that, but reaping the rewards of, the economy at the time. And that's saying like, hey, strong times make weak men make hard times make strong men. Yeah. It's a cycle. Well, and unfortunately they had good times. Mm-hmm. We were the strong men that came out of those good times. That next generation is the boomers. Like, they're gonna, like, they got the good times from our hard strong men. So,
well, and I to be fair, a lot of boomers did serve in Vietnam. Yeah. Because you got to think, if you're born in the late 40s, I'd put you right at draft age, 18, 19. And look, there was a big upset over the draft. There was a lot of people opposing the draft and protesting the draft. And, look at their view for good reason. Their fathers are probably in the war. They probably saw themselves as a group of people who wanted peace, and they didn't want to be involved in a war. They saw what their fathers went through and their grandfathers maybe even. So, to be fair, a lot of them did sacrifice a lot. A lot of them did die in Vietnam. A lot of them did have to walk into the meat grinder. And that's unfortunate, right? But for those who did come out of the other side unscathed, they had a great deal of economic, boom. I mean, and they were very lucky. And I suppose one day someone would say the same thing about us. Again, as I said earlier in the podcast, in the show, it's very easy for a generation to say, well, you don't know what my generation went through. You kids have it so easy. You don't know what we went through because you've already went through it. The kids haven't. So it's really easy to say, well, you kids don't know what sacrifice is. You kids don't know what hard work is. Well, yeah, of course they don't, because they haven't been through it yet. And I realize that now at being over 40, it's like you realize that, they're right and you're right at the same time. You're both right, but it just depends on when you're right. Like, right. Where you're at in that time frame as to, where your mind tends to go. I mean, my favorite economist who's wrote tons of stuff on the economy is Dr. Thomas Sowell.
Oh, the man.
I love Thomas Sowell.
Yes.
And, in his youth, he was a Marxist.
He was.
And I'm talking leftist.
Full blown, yeah.
A lot of people are Marxists in their youth. And only as they get older do they realize how the world really works, and they have more information available to them. And the ones that actually care to overcome their individual biases about the world before them, Dr. Sowell realized, wait a minute. He started looking into the deep and dirty and dark and going, whoa, hold on here, right? There are a lot of fallacies at play here that must be explained. And he sought to make it his effort to explain those things in the most astute way possible. And all you have to know about Dr. Sowell's work is to look at how academia treats Dr. Sowell now. Now, granted, he has his cult following of people who absolutely adore him, and of course, rightly so. But look how many of these so-called academics, say, oh, well, you don't need to listen to Dr. Sowell. He's wrong about this, wrong about that. Like, so many people dismiss Dr. Sowell. But that should tell you exactly what you need to know about the guy's views. He's damn right on a lot of things.
Yes.
And whether you study Rothbard or any of those guys, Mises. I mean, there's so many views on economy and liberty and freedom of association and freedom of choice. I mean, we could go into a whole nother spill about all of that in a whole nother podcast, but it's just so crazy to think that the way that our economy is viewed and looked at, it comes from so many different directions and so many types of goods and services and usury and credit and debasement. It's mind-blowing when you look at it from a bird's eye view in its totality. It's just absolutely mind-blowing, especially for the average person.
So Thomas Sowell is an absolute gem, and he is onwards of like 90 years. I think he's like 90 to 94 years old.
Still working.
He still puts out
Still
content.
writing.
Like he still puts out content. So think about this. He is a former Marxist. He's African American. For those that don't know who he is, that's really his claim to fame. Like he was one of the most notable African American economists that really was more right leaning, but at the same time, he lived through the entire, segregation and racism and pretty much everything that you could have experienced at that age. And he came out, and he is probably the most prolific writers of equity versus equality. So for someone to experience segregation, to experience racism, and to still come out and explain about equality and equity and how race isn't really at play in that whole thing is absolutely stunning. And it's amazing to hear him speak. If you really want to watch and understand how dialogue, how public discourse should work, go and watch some of his debates where he sits with, there'll be four people sitting in a panel, and they're very respectful, and they really, really get into the meat and potatoes of, like, some guys are Marxist. He's giving the anti-Marxist position, and they're all respectful. There's no shouting, there's no yelling, there's no trying to shut the other person down. And it is probably the most beautiful thing that I've watched. And they're able to all get out complete sentences, coherent thoughts, complete thoughts before the next person just chimes in. And it's all very, very good information. And it's how I would imagine a proper debate and ethical public discourse to take place.
I tell you, if every presidential debate
Oh my God,
was
yes.
conducted in such a manner, I don't know if the average person would be able to they wouldn't even watch it, because they're looking for that mudslinging. They're looking
Yes.
for that sort of Jerry
That
Springer
soundbite.
like soundbite
Yep.
kind of vibe. It's more about being liked as a person than it is actually being honored and cherished for your economic policies, your political policies, your moral policy, even your morals. I mean, and that's what's so crazy is the political world has turned into such a popularity contest, more so that, it's who can get the most money and who can raise the most money and beat out the other person and be more likable, which I guess politics is about being likable, but at the end of the day, it's a popularity contest. And it just seems to me that you see so many figures that really should be more like Dr. Sowell in terms of their overall views. We would be in a much better place if we had 100 Thomas Sowells and 100 Thomas Masseys.
I'm a fan of Massey. Yeah.
I mean, we would be in a much better position if economists and scientists actually, made decisions in regards to the economy and sciences than some people who aren't even qualified to freaking be a door greeter at Walmart, much less. I mean, just because they're a very popular door greeter at Walmart doesn't mean they're, qualified to be making some of the decisions that they make. And I'm not going to sit here and speak of qualifications. I'm sitting here giving an entire lecture on the economy. I'm not an economist. I'm just a person who just sees it for what it is. And I hope that people maybe agree with me and see things the way that I do. And I guess there's a sort of a confirmation bias that's there for me as a person to go, well, I'll put my views out there, and if people agree with me, then I must be right. That may not even always necessarily be the case. I'm willing to accept new information and try to see the truth as it unfolds and as the information unfolds. Just because a very popular person has an opinion on something that a whole bunch of people agree with doesn't mean they're right. It just means that other people might be as misinformed as that person.
Right.
And I'm willing to accept that I could be that person. I'm not ever going to sit there and say that I'm the end-all, do-all on everything I discuss.
Well, in Massey's defense, he is the shining example of what the original Congress was. They were average, normal people that didn't have any like political aspirations. He ran as a joke. Like he was joking, but he was like, "Hey, I'm just going to throw my name in the hat because I'm unhappy with the person that's there."
He didn't care if he got elected or not.
He was just like, "Hey, man, I'm here. This is what I stand for. This is my goals." And I was like, "Holy crap, I won!" And
they love that guy.
And he is what you would imagine, like just a person with common sense that's in office. He says what the normal person thinks. Like you're like, hold on, wait a second, let's review that. Let's look at that again versus just like being a yes man,
right?
And
he's caught a lot of flack.
And that's really your job, like to catch flack. Like you're there representing your constituents, and you have to be true to that. And if you can't just nod your head and yes and say yes to everything. So he's got my respect. That's for sure.
I agree. I may not always agree with everything Congressman Massey has to say, but I will say I agree with most of it. And even the things that I may not see eye to eye with him on, I respect his candor and his approach to being methodical and scientific about his views, and more importantly, constitutional.
That's a big one.
I really respect Thomas Massey a lot. I think he's a really great guy. Before we wrap up the show, I want to give a shout out to one more sponsor for the show, and that is Allegiance Gold. One of the things I've always admired about President Trump is that he believes in letting Americans be Americans, strong, self-reliant, and free. He cut taxes, fought for our energy independence, and told the global elites to get lost because he trusts the American people to take care of their families and their future. And that's exactly what you need to do right now with your wealth. Let me tell you, while the media spins distractions and the markets bounce all over the place, gold and silver have been quietly climbing, recently surpassing $3,300. They're doing what they've always done, protecting value, preserving freedom, and giving Americans a hedge against uncertainty. You can sit and wait, or take the kind of action President Trump would respect: smart, calculated, and prepared. That's why I always trust Allegiance Gold. They make it easy to roll over your IRA, your 401k, or your TSP, or make a direct purchase of physical gold or silver. Call 844-790-9191 or visit allegiancegold.com/LLP. That's Lima Papa. Right now, you can get up to $5,000 in free gold or silver coins with a qualified investment. Freedom means protecting what's yours. Don't leave it to chance. Check out allegiancegold.com/LLP. That's Lima Papa for more information. You'll see a link down to all of our sponsors in the description box below if you're watching here in video form. So we do post the video every Monday over on Iraq Veteran 8888. We also have this podcast in audio form, so I know some of you are listening in audio form. If you do want to watch us on video form, we do post the video of this podcast every week. So tune in 9 a.m. every Monday. Sometimes I'm late uploading the show. I apologize, okay? But generally, the show launches around 9 a.m. every Monday, Eastern Standard Time. So we appreciate everyone's support and for checking out the show, and we hope you enjoyed our opinions here today. Anything else, Matt, before we head on?
Nope. Great show. Had a great conversation.
Dude, I think we really got in some good territory on this one.
Oh, yeah, we did.
I really do, because I feel like, this subject is, I'll end by saying, I'll give some a little afterthought as we end the show here today, is that I think that this subject tends to be something that is picked apart in this academic way so much. You know, people are so quick to go, well, what are your qualifications to discuss the economy? What are your qualifications to do this, do that? But I think sometimes that's the wrong approach. What are your observations? What have you observed? What have you actually seen? Don't worry about what some person on the news tells you is happening. What have you witnessed? What have you seen that would lead you to believe that things are good and or bad or both or anywhere in between? If you can't physically observe what's going on with the markets or how it's affecting your bottom line as a consumer or how it's affecting your bottom line as a business owner, I would say that to take what you're hearing maybe with some degree of scrutiny.
Yep.
And that's okay. Is that to say that maybe your investments are going to change in the stock market, or your overall profile financially is going to make some shifts and changes as you see the need to pivot? Perhaps if the market changes, sure, change up your investments a bit. You know, that's just be my advice. Again, I'm not an expert, but I would say just rely on your observations. What can you witness? What can you pay tribute to as, you know, something to hang your hat on that you've seen as verifiable evidence to back up what your heart's telling you? That's the most important thing. Yes, you know, this subject matter can get torn apart down to the line item. Sure, it most certainly can. And there's people way more qualified than me to have that discussion with. But I think it's important for the end, especially the end consumer, the average everyday person on the street. It's important to, you know, verify what can you observe and take that to the bank. Take what you can observe and turn that into, you know, what your overall answer is going to be for that.
Yeah, great. That's a great observation. I would take it one step further and say the things that we discuss, we're probably much more in line with the average listener than what you're going to find in the guy living in the DMV area eating $500 A5 Wagyu and, you know, drinking champagne on a daily basis, all on the government's dime. We're eating, you know, we're just eating USDA prime ribeye and Costco champagne. So we're much more in line with what you're experiencing.
And I'll just end by saying I ain't a damn hater, okay? Like, hey, if you're eating Wagyu and drinking champagne, I don't hate you by any stretch of the imagination. I myself enjoy some Wagyu from time to time.
Yes.
I'm not gonna say I don't. So hey, look, if that's your flavor, by all means, enjoy it. Have yourselves a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the flip side. Bye. Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Ink by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, dangerous freedom. Have a good one.